So I want to reference something that I was talking about on Monday's pod, and that's about first-round quarterbacks. Now, I've done different versions of this in the past. We went through 20 years of drafts. Basically, the bust rate was like 50%. That was something we did years ago, and I've referenced a lot. I think last year I started looking at first-round quarterbacks on their second journey and how rare it was for any of those quarterbacks taken in the first round on a new team, how rarely they were successful. And I went back deeper drafts. And this year I kind of cut it down. Like I put the bookends a little bit tighter to each other to kind of talk about another point. But essentially after doing that one, the realization is that almost all of them are failures on the second stop. Tannehill was one of the rare exceptions. You could talk about Jameis potentially, being a serviceable starter. I mean, there was just a lot of stuff that like post Andy Dalton's run of Cincinnati, it was never ever the same. And Andy Dalton was actually like good enough to have the job for multiple years. So if you go back and look at it, first round quarterbacks on their second team provide almost nothing historically. And yet right now we're looking at Goff playing better than he's ever played and Baker Mayfield playing better than he's ever played and potentially positioning two NFC teams to play in the playoffs, which does not happen. Let's start it again. This time I looked at the drafts from 2014 and just the first round picks. I went all the way up to like 2019, but I think it starts to get a little too recent where the numbers are essentially irrelevant and it could be too soon with some of these guys. So let's go through it. Bortles, the number 3 pick in 2014, 73 starts at Jacksonville. He ended up with the Rams 0 starts. 3 years he's been out of the league. 0 playoff wins after Jacksonville. Manziel taken 21st. We know that story. 8 starts with Cleveland, out of the league. Number 32, Teddy Bridgewater that year. Minnesota, 28 starts, had the nasty injury. He ended up on 5 different teams, 0 playoff wins. Is actually the backup to Goff now. Serviceable starter in Carolina, Denver. You can make that argument. But like serviceable starter for this run of quarterbacks, and you could even go back deeper years like I have, serviceable starter is a massive win on this kind of transaction. Jameis, 70 starts at Tampa Bay. He's had 10 starts, 3 years with New Orleans, 0 playoff wins. Mariota, 61 starts with Tennessee, time with the Raiders, Atlanta. Now he's the backup at Philly. He had 13 starts with Atlanta last year, was basically just kind of a placeholder, 0 playoff wins. Jared Goff, 69 starts with LA, 0 playoff wins since then, but 35 starts with Detroit. And we're going to get to his numbers a little bit more in depth at the end of this. Carson Wentz, number 2 overall pick behind Goff, 68 starts with Philadelphia, 17 starts with the Colts, 7 starts with Washington, 0 playoff wins. I'm still, despite all the Wentz conversations, and because it went in a lot of different directions, who was he as a guy? What was he like as a teammate? All that kind of stuff, the injuries and all those things. And then if you even look at that Indy year, you can trick yourself after the fact statistically. You're like, hey, what? He was pretty good. I guess I'm shocked it got that bad that soon. That's all I really have. I think we've covered Wentz before. Paxton Lynch, not a long career. 5 starts at Denver, out of the league after those 2 years out in Colorado. 2017 draft, number 2 pick, Mitchell Trubisky, 50 starts with the Bears. In 21 with Buffalo, 22 and 23 with Pittsburgh, 5 starts there, 0 playoff wins. Patrick Mahomes, think they're going to hold on to that guy. He was the 10th pick. The 12th pick, Deshaun Watson, 53 starts with Houston. He's had 9 with Cleveland. That's a TBD at this point, but his QB rating dropped from 104.5 with Houston to now 82.4. This is the year that I think we'll have the answer if Deshaun Watson is ever going to show anything again. And there's been some moments, but it's almost just an improvement based on how disastrous last year, but the excuse being hadn't played football in a couple of years. Also 0 playoff wins. Baker Mayfield, 59 starts with Cleveland. 22, he's on Carolina and the LA Rams. There's a small part of you that goes, wait, is he going to be good with McVay if Stafford can't stay healthy? Well, Stafford, is back and it's his job. That means he's with Tampa. We realize that. It's a month in, but it's the best QBR of Baker's career. And I want to get to some other deeper stats on how good of a job he's doing actually getting rid of the ball slower than Brady did. So he's had 14 total starts post Cleveland, also 0 playoff wins. 2018 draft, we're still on it. Sam Darnold was the 3rd pick, 38 starts with the Jets in 3 years. In 21 and 22, Carolina 17 starts. Now he's the backup at San Francisco, 0 playoff wins. Josh Allen, also another guy that's going to work out. Staying with that draft, Josh Rosen, Arizona, 13 starts 1 year. They drafted Kyler, had some time on Miami's roster, 3 starts there, was signed and cut by Tampa, San Francisco, Atlanta. He had 11 pass attempts, spent time with Cleveland, Minnesota, now out of the league, 0 playoff wins. Lamar Jackson, 65 starts. I could do the 2019 draft, but it's Kyler, which is TBD, Daniel Jones, who's probably still feeling the impact of the other night. And of course, we lost Dwayne Haskins. And then it's looking like the 2020 draft with Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Jordan Love is still an incomplete grade on that. But that could go down as one of the more successful quarterback drafts that we have. So let's look at some numbers. That's 16 quarterbacks. If I go from 2014 to 2018, because I'm not going to include Rosen, I'm not going to include Kyler's class from him being the number 1 pick in 2019. So we've got the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 draft here. There are 16 first-round quarterbacks. If you take all of them, including the guys that have been locks, Lamar, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, that's an average of 51.5 starts among those 16 QBs. If you take out Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson, it's still a close number, and some of this is the limitation of multiple seasons. Some of this can be deemed a little too recent, which means there's just lack of other seasons to add to these numbers. But the first-round quarterbacks that were drafted from 14 to 18 that the team moved on from gave you an average of 45.7 starts. And when you're taking one of these guys, what you think and what you're introducing when you have his jersey and he has his presser, it's like, okay, we've got a guy for the next 10 years. And no one really thinks that anymore. That's the hope. But it's 3 out of 16 from that group that truly are those guys. And hell, Lamar, if he'd gotten his way, would have moved on, but that would have been different. It was more contractual. It wasn't his ability to play. But I'm telling you right now, digging at all the Lamar stats, the MVP season is now showing up as his fluke season. So take that however you want. If you're a Ravens fan, you're probably not going to like that, but it's just true. It is a complete spike along the chart of his production where it's like this season is way beyond the other seasons. He's only had one other season with more than 20 touchdown passes. However, they always seem to be in it. Good organization. And we'll see how that offense looks the rest of the way this year. So the more impressive, or I would say not impressive thing, essentially, is that, let me pick that up here, where I say more impressive. I don't know that it's the right word would be impressive in the summary of what all this means, because it's actually, the whole point is that it's not impressive. The point is none of the guys that moved on to another team ever won a playoff game in 5 drafts. 0. Okay, so why is that important? Well, it's important because what Goff, and more so Goff because it feels more stable than Baker, but we're talking about guys doing something that's kind of unprecedented. Going to another team as a first rounder and then going to win a playoff game. Now, there's also a counter to the argument, which I'll provide here. And that could be, well, wait, if you're a team that's willing to take, if the team that drafted you is moving on after 50 starts, then it means you're not good. Right? I think that's, for the most part, that's a pretty safe assumption about your run after you were drafted. You weren't good enough to keep the job. The team didn't win enough games. They're going to draft another guy, right? Okay, pretty simple to follow. So what we're looking at here is a pretty significant trend of when the team moves on and you have a new starting gig, you never win. You never win anywhere. Now, if we want to go in circles on this, we could say, okay, well, wait a minute. If a team that drafts you in the first round and you start your 50 games and they move on from you, means you didn't win enough there. So how good could you be? So then if a team is willing to take that on as the recycled quarterback, they couldn't have been in a great spot either. So it wasn't really that great of a team. Okay, all of those things are fair. But it also proves the point that if Goff is winning a playoff round this year, or Baker is, they're doing something that's completely unprecedented in recent history. That's the point. Because you're still a little excited, especially if that quarterback flames out with an organization that we deem the bad organizations. You're like, okay, well, we can fix them. Again, I think McVay, specifically Shanahan, McDaniel, if he ever had to fix anybody, looks like Tua's doing pretty well. But you get, there's a very short list of guys that be like, okay, maybe it happens there, right? But pretty much everywhere else, it's just you're delaying the inevitable as we ran through all of these resumes. So if you look at Goff, Goff has the best QB of his career at sixth in the NFL. Granted, the QBRs are higher now. They'll go down a little bit. He was fifth last year. This year, he's fourth in yards per attempt, but he's also ninth in completion percentage. So sometimes you can see a really high completion percentage, and you go like, okay, but what are the yards per attempt? And they can kind of cancel each other out. There used to be a lot easier way of looking at quarterbacks. Hey, this guy's throwing it deeper. Hey, this guy's completion percent. But some of the offenses make it so easy to juke those stats that you're still not quite sure what you're getting out of your quarterback. But so far now, another year of Goff being even better than he was last year, and Detroit's defense being the issue. They are positioned in the NFC where Philly is 4-0. We don't even feel like they've been awesome yet. San Francisco's maybe the class of the NFL. But then after that, is Detroit in that group with Dallas? Is Dallas ahead of them? All right, well, Dallas is ahead of them. The way the NFC feels right now, I don't know that there's more than 3 teams ahead of the way we feel about Detroit. How about this number from Baker? So Baker's across the board traditional stats are also really good based on what he's done in the past. It's the best QBR of his career. It's the best completion percentage. It's the lowest sack rate. His interception percentage is half of what it was in Cleveland. Yes, just a month in. But I love checking in with Mike Sando's stuff on Monday, and I didn't share this in its entirety when we recapped everything on Monday because I wanted to save it for today. But there's a really interesting trend that's going on with Baker versus what Brady was doing last season. So essentially, Sando presents it this way. Brady last year got rid of the ball in 2.3 seconds. This is another thing with weird quarterback stats where we go, man, that guy gets rid of the football so quick. But can you actually get rid of the ball a little too quickly? Well, you can argue in Brady's case last year, which 2.3 seconds on the release was the quickest that he's ever gotten rid of the ball in any season that's ever been tracked in Brady's career, that actually was hurting what they were doing. Now, granted, I think when I watched the Tampa games, and I think I did mention this a little bit on Monday, that I thought they were so one-dimensional and they kind of just knew it, that it was like, is there any way we could just figure out a way to do this and get the ball out? I think that's kind of what they were doing, but I also think there was some self-preservation stuff with Brady. He's like, yeah, I can stay healthy because I'm literally never going to keep the ball back there in my hands all that long. But it starts to hurt some of the developing routes. And these numbers prove it. So if Brady were at 2.3 seconds last year, Mayfield is now getting rid of the ball through a month in at 2.59 seconds on average. Okay. So if you go from any time that Brady actually held onto the ball last year over 2.3 seconds in comparison to what Mayfield is doing when he's getting rid of the ball after 2.3 seconds, here we go. The completion percentage for Brady was under 54%. For Baker, it's 65%. Yards per attempt, 6.9 for Brady, 8.3 for Mayfield. Touchdown to interception ratio. Brady, 8-6. Baker, 5-1. Just straight up QB rating, not QBR, 76 for Brady, 110 for Baker. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that is just really good in Baker's favor. So it's not always just the traditional things. It's some of those other little things. And I know the reports are going to start coming out because they have a nice record that, oh, he gets along with everybody likes it. We destroy your personality when you're losing and you have the exact same personality. You start winning and then all of those things become a positive. That's the part from the outside that I always find really annoying. If I were an athlete, I'd be like, dude, I'm literally the same person. And now because we're 3-1 instead of 1-3, I'm different. But that's what's going to happen. If they keep doing this, there will be like, man, the guys really resonate. Man, he really gets it. He's fiery. He's never ever going to quit. Well, he's also apparently, by the numbers, just a much better quarterback. So if Goff and Baker find a way to do this, it's something that isn't done for guys in their second home.